Now entering Sentinel's Lair podcast show.
Expanding our mind through stories of everyday people.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Sentinel's Lairs podcast, episode number 3. Today, I'm excited. We have Richard Rudis, who we're talking to today, who is an Army veteran and does some amazingly cool things with gong baths and healing energy. But what makes him even more cooler is that he's not only just my uncle, but he's also my godfather. Welcome, Rudis. Thank you Mr. Rudis. Thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Sure. I'm glad to be here.
Now, you were in the Army, right?
I was.
How long were you in?
I was in for 2 years. I was drafted in 1970.
Okay.
Just on the edge of the lottery.
Well, thank you very much for your service. I know we hear it a lot, but at the same time, I don't think a lot of times we don't hear it enough. And it really it means a lot when I talk to other veterans too, and I say thank you to them.
Okay.
So now a little bit of history about you, which is an awesome, I'm sure I could probably listen to your story for like 6 hours because it's so interesting, but post-military, I know that you do the gong baths and it's a sound energy healing. Mm-hmm. And I know you didn't just start that one day. And I know that was a pretty long journey that got you there. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember one conversation we were having when you were talking about when you were overseas and you were telling me a story about how you saw just all the damage that was done from firebombing, but there was one mountain that was just very lush and green. And then you said when you asked the pilot, what's that there? Why is it saved? And they said it was a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist monastery. And I'm probably saying that wrong. Is that kind of where you first started looking at and inquiring about going that road?
Yeah, that was certainly the seed that was implanted at that time, although I didn't know it at the time. I was, as I said, I was drafted and I was a difficult soldier. And at that time, that meant you were sent directly to Vietnam, which was probably my lot anyway. So I was up in the mountains, just about 30 miles from the DMZ with the Corps of Engineers. And we were on a mission to reopen a marine airport in Laos. Totally inappropriate, but that's, you do what you do because they tell you to do it. So anyway, we were flying over. They had napalmed and the jungle around this area for 3 or 4 days before we got there. So everything was reduced to ashes. Little bits of villages here and there. The jungle was completely reduced to red dust. And as you said, we came up over the hill and was coming in attack mode and fast and low. And there was this pristine hilltop that was it was like finding a patch of grass on the moon. Totally out of place, should not have been there. And I, out of curiosity, asked the pilot, and as you said, he said it was a Tibetan monastery, and that he didn't really know anything about it either, or why it was spared the devastation. As you know, that blanket bombing didn't discern one hilltop from another; just an area was totally destroyed. But anyway, it was the beginning of my passage towards finding some sanity. I found the warscape to be insane in many details. And when I came back, I was damaged. So I went to the Army, and I was still in the service, and asked if I could have some psychological help, and they wanted to put me on medications. I spent a year there avoiding drugs, so I wasn't going to do that once I got home.
It's amazing how the VA just wants to. It's like they just want to push drugs. That's it.
Yeah, especially in 70. Then I saw my sister-in-law, who happened to be a nurse, and she invited me to Valium, which I didn't want to do again for the same reasons. And then I went to the church. I was a Roman Catholic, and they really didn't have any framework to be of any use to me. So I was kind of left out in the cold, and discovered through my own studies Eastern philosophies that then led me ultimately to Buddhism. But I think that monastery in Laos, untouched by the chaos around it, was I see it now as a kernel or awakening moment for me.
Like that reaching out to you to say, hey.
Yeah. And again, I was unaware of it at the time, but years later, I went into therapy and spent 10 years in therapy, actually. And but it's the Buddhist studies that really started to make sense out of the world for me. And I have an engineering background. So when I went to Nepal, when I went to Tibet and India, I discovered that there were instruments used in these various teachings, and very specifically for very specific reasons. And so I started studying those instruments to find why they were used the way they were, and what time, in what timing within each of the teachings. And I discovered the Tibetan path for vibrational healing. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of studies both overseas and here in the States. In the 80s, I was one of 3 people that were studying seriously in the States, and we collaborated a great deal. And then in 96, the Tibetans use gongs, but I really wasn't as attracted to them. They weren't used actually for altering consciousness. They're more used for accent. But in 96, Paisti gongs in Germany, their manufacturing plant is in Germany, came a friend of theirs, a collaborator of theirs, Hans Gustav, wrote a book on the harmony of the spheres, in which, using astrological observations and geometry, determined the vibrational sound, the rate of electromagnetic pulse from each one of the planets in our solar system, including the moon and the sun. And it turned out that in the Vedic, just to back up a little bit, the Vedic tradition, which is debatable, but they say is 12,000 years in the making, discovered that the Om syllable, which is the syllable of creation, Eastern philosophy is concerned. If in Western philosophy, in Genesis, God said, "Let there be light," so he used vibration to bring light into the universe. And the Vedic tradition has the same viewpoint, but rather than that word was Om. And we discovered that the Om is C sharp at 136.1 hertz, while the sacred instruments, the drum strings on the sitar, for instance, is the high and low is tuned to that C sharp. So back to Paisti, they found that the Earth in its orbit around the sun is the same C sharp at 136.1 hertz. So that stimulated my interest. I bought my first earth gong, did a lot of personal study with it for about 2 years, and then finally made it and the other instruments, the Himalayan bowl, like you have there, brought it out to the public. And so I've been touring, and I'm writing a book, and I've been teaching now for, I don't know, about 25 years, maybe a little bit more than that. But it's all it's organic. Yeah.
I know you've been teaching a long time. I know you've mentored a bunch of people. I know you've even mentored me a little bit. Like it's funny. You mentioned the insanity of war, and like we're trained to go and do what we got to do, but we're not really given the best training on how to come back and be a good civilian sometimes. And I remember having a conversation with you one time. It was right where I was kind of on that, I still had my Christian faith because of something that happened to me, but I was feeling empty with it, just wasn't feeling anything with it. And I remember it was a phone conversation I had with you, and you probably said, and I repeat this to everybody when I'm talking to them about it. And I said, yeah, my uncle, Richard, he gave me the best advice that I probably ever could have gotten in my life that, would know it or not, probably in a lot of ways saved me, was that you can still practice the Buddhist ways and be Christian.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever religion. And at first it didn't make much sense, but then, after the conversation, I'm like, wow, so let me try this meditation thing. And let me listen to a couple of different things of guiding me through. And it's just been a whirlwind since. And definitely has given me a spiritual awakening. Definitely find myself being a lot more grounded. People who know me prior to the military cannot believe that I haven't raised my voice or yelled or really lost my temper or broke anything in anger. And people who know me now, they're just like, yeah, we just don't see you being that kind of a temperamental person. And it was all from that one conversation that you and I had that time. And I know, like you said, the VA, they just want to give medications. They still just want to give drugs. That was probably the best advice that anybody could have ever given me that really got me to be grounded and brought down.
Oh, thank you. I used to teach comparative religion on a college level, and the test of what is a religion and what is a philosophy is that if you could be, as far as the Buddhists are concerned, you could be a Buddhist Christian. But as far as the Christians are concerned, you can only be a Christian. You can't be a Christian Buddhist. Buddhism is misinterpreted as a religion, and easily understandable, but it really is more of a philosophical way of going through life that is more compassionate and wisdom-based. One of the predicts of the teachings is that you help where you can and you try to do no harm. That's not a bad way of going through life, actually.
No, more people should be that. I mean, in today's day and age, it seems like everything we look at is trying to tear us apart as far as humanity goes. And myself and I'm finding myself becoming more and more attracted to things that are going to have the opposite effect and want to bring people together. Hence is why I started this podcast. I'm like, there's enough negativity in the world. I don't want to deal with much of it anymore. And ironically, it's all driven by people with ulterior motives.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
Now you had actually spent some time in Tibet as well, didn't you?
Quite a bit of time, actually. I've been there 12 times, I think, over the years. My first pilgrimage there was in '96.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is stories coming, or not story, but like from hearing from my mom and stuff. But you were one of the very few outsiders that were actually taken in and initiated. I don't know if that's the right word used, that to be a Tibetan monk, correct?
I was on pilgrimage in the '96. Actually, the '96 pilgrimage was quite magical in a lot of ways, and I was at the monastery that is associated with the Karmapa. There are 5 schools of Buddhism and subdivisions beyond that, but 5 principal schools headed by a different Rinpoche or a lama, a high lama. So for instance, the Dalai Lama is the head of the Yellow Hats and also was the temporal guide for Tibet. He has relinquished that position, which I think very for political reasons. Mm-hmm. But the counterpart to the Dalai Lama is the Karmapa, and they're the Black Hats. Their teachings are more feminine based. In fact, the feminine warriors, the Dakinis of Buddhism, have black hair, and the hats that they wear was said to be woven from the hair of the Dakini. Anyway, in '96, his monastery had been destroyed, as most monasteries were in Tibet, during the Chinese invasion and ultimate occupation. And but it was very, very remote. It was very difficult to get there. There was no roads, riverbeds, and a lot of hiking and taking yaks or 4-wheel drive vehicles as far as you could. It was a difficult place to get to. And that was part of my itinerary. A lay monk that was part of the Karmapa's teachings. And he felt it was important for me to meet the Karmapa, which he was young at the time. He was only 12 years old, I think. But the Chinese were very, and still are, very tight in their control of the Karmapa, the Dalai Lama, of all the Buddhist traditions. And so there was not really a chance to communicate directly with him. Monks were threatened to report on any Westerners coming into Serpu, the name of the monastery. And if they didn't, then their families in Lhasa, for instance, could be punished and put in jail for extortion and tortured. I mean, they literally torture people in jail. So nobody knew who to trust, and just being a Westerner was a challenge for them, for me to be there. But I was invited, and I went. So I spent time meditating in a meditation cave there, which is a tradition. Some lamas will spend 7 years, 7 months, 7 weeks, and 7 days alone, essentially in a cave, and people would bring a food in the morning in an empty bucket, and in the evening they threw a little slot in the door, and in the evening they would take the empty tray and the full bucket out for over 7 years. I wasn't prepared to do that, but I did do a long meditation in one of those caves. And at one point, 3 monks came in. It's really, really remote and high. I think Serpu's around 16,000, 16,005
That's a little high up
And,
there.
yeah, and things have changed now. There's roads there. There's even places for people, Westerners, to stay. But the Karmapa has escaped. He escaped 2 years afterwards into India for refuge. But the monks came to my door at midnight, and they were carrying what are called jewels of understanding. When a monk or a teacher of high learning is cremated, they will sift through the ashes, and there's oftentimes little pearl-like nodules made of bone, sometimes tooth. In the Karmapa's case, he's the 17th Karmapa, but the 16th Karmapa, when he died, his heart wouldn't burn, so they removed his heart and put it in a sanctuary. And part of his skull had the natural growth of the Buddha in meditation, and that is kept in Sikkim, another monastery of the Karmapas. But so they offered me, I think, 12 of these jewels. When normally they're kept in a stupa, or a sacred construction. And when the Chinese, I'm not quite sure how they did this, but they brought up some artillery and blew the stupa apart, and hundreds of thousands, over 2,000 years of these relics kind of fell onto the ground. The monks collected them, and I imagine most of them have been returned to a new stupa, but 12 of them were gifted to me, and at that night, for reasons I couldn't understand, and still many things I don't understand the whys of, but they gifted me that, and they asked me if I would take refuge with the Buddha through the Karmapa the following morning. In Western terms, it would be, you'd be sitting on your couch, and the Pope, comes out, or a cardinal comes to your door and knocks on it and say, want to take communion from the Pope in the morning. Or she would say yes, and why not? Pretty good blessing, So anyway, I went through the ritual of formally taking my vows as a Buddhist, and that was part of wasn't my beginning of my journey. My journey really began in the mid-'80s, but it was a major stepping stone towards my greater understanding of the teachings, the philosophy, and the instruments that are used to alter consciousness into a more receptive or understanding to a greater truth. Buddhism does not adhere to the concept of a creator God. Much like physics tells us that energy cannot be destroyed or created, it can only be transmuted, saying that all the energy in the universe that ever was still is, essentially, and the energy that makes us up after death dissipates. And in Christian terms, that dissipates into a soul state. In Buddhist terms, it dissipates into a conscious state, or a consciousness that reincarnates into another vessel. One of the greatest teachings about reincarnation for me was a monk poured himself a cup of tea and then smashed the cup of tea on the altar, and it said, well, tell me about the cup. And well, the cup is broken. It's no longer a cup. It's just a trash now. It's just a bunch of pieces. And he said, that's correct, but tell me about the tea. And of course, the tea is still tea. It's always tea, whether it's in the carpet or splashed up on your legs or in your gullet. It's always tea. And that was his way of telling me and others that that's the essence of who we are. We go from one vessel to another. And there are things that we can do or are responsible for doing within the vessel that we're in that will impact the next vessel that we find ourselves in. In Buddhism, that's all of that takes place within a sphere of time. We're all locked in the realms of the 7 realms of existence within the sphere of time. And we repeat that infinitely, millions of times, perhaps. It's
that makes so much more sense to me than a lot of stuff that we're more traditionally kind of, I don't want to say beaten into, but like just we're constantly preached to of what is and what isn't, and there's no in between. If you don't look at it this way, you're wrong. Just this is what we tell you, look at it. And me being the inquisitive little dude I am, that makes a lot more sense to me, because I do feel and believe strongly that we are a catalyst of energy, and we are all connected within the universe in some way, shape, or form. And as much as I'd like to believe that when we pass, we go to some magical place, but I don't necessarily, I think we go to a magical place that we, like you said, we regenerate, we rebirth, and we reincarnate somewhere else.
Yeah, in the 7 ways of incarnation, there are hells. There's hells that are hell beings. There's hungry ghosts. There's insects and animals. There's human beings. There's demigods, and there's gods. And the clue there for the teaching is that we're all locked in the same sphere of existence. That the gods are, having a more pleasant experience. They're living almost for an infinite period of time. The hell being, if you think of them as psychological states, which is what I do, I think of there are people that are living in their own self-designed and manufactured hells. There are people who are hungry ghosts, which are like vampires feeding off the energy of others. There's, obviously there's a consciousness involved with being an insect and other living beings other than humans. Humans have a very special place in that incarnation set because we're aware of our mortality, and we only have a certain period of time to come to terms with that and to decide what kind of lives we're going to live and what we're going to leave behind. The demigods are beings that are still have some ego attached and are sort of conflicted there. And then the gods, as I say, are having a good old time. But enlightenment is not within the sphere of time and space. So when Buddha released his royal vows to find another way of existing, it was not to become worshipped or to become a god or to become a prophet even. He wanted to find a way of breaking the sphere of birth and rebirth and birth and rebirth. And in so doing, he discovered the exit door, essentially, which is referred to as enlightenment. So bodhisattvas and Buddhas are plentiful. Their existence is outside of time-space, although they intervene and work with us to help us find our own enlightenment. The Bodhisattva vow is that they will not totally emerge in the enlightened state of being as long as there's one suffering being in the universe. And to not be not be enlightened is to be at some level suffering. We're suffering because of disease. We're suffering because of the state of the world. We're suffering because we're going to die someday. There's all kinds of reasons to suffer, and all of us do so in our own way as throughout a life.
That's one of the things that's always gotten me to question a lot of things too, is it as far as what we were told traditionally is, if we do what we're supposed to do and we live as the best person we can, why should we be so scared of death? And it's amazing how many people are. And you said something kind of interesting too about, as far as like the living hells, like how we could be living within our own hell in our mind. And I was talking my episode 2, I was talking to a girl, she's a cosplay creator and performer, and she had some really tragic things. And if she's the kind of person, Richard, I'm telling you, if you're having a bad day, go look at some of her TikTok videos she does. If you're not feeling happy, or at least a smile, I do suggest maybe getting some professional counseling. She's such a positive person. And she's a great example of, she could very easily allow herself to live in her own personal hell. But instead she took those tragedies, found her way, and is now projecting that positivity onto other people. And when I hear a lot of people, and again, a lot of it is my lack of fully knowledge, but when I hear people talk about Buddhism and the Buddhist way of life, that's really what a lot of what I hear from them is being the best person you can, healing yourself, and help projecting that healing onto other people.
Yeah. Buddha was a scientist, essentially. An empirical observation was his key understanding to the universe. And the second law of thermodynamics tells us that not only the energy cannot be created or destroyed, but that energy is non-biased. We put the labels on energy. We say this is negative or that's positive. In psychological terms. And when I was turning 40, I remember reading a physics book and thinking, well, if energy has no baggage, then, and I believed at that time that you had to suffer in some way to get ahead. You had to work very hard to make enough money to buy a house, to do whatever your goals in life were. And that didn't necessarily mean that you, in fact, it meant that, from my parents' teachings, it meant that you sacrificed and that you didn't necessarily glean a lot of joy out of life to get the things that you feel that you needed to get, to be successful, to be whatever story you're telling yourself. But then I realized that if energy had no quality other than just being energy, then I could grow through joy. I don't have to be suffering to have some sort of enlightened growth period. So I consciously, at that point, made a choice that I would joy into my life, because I would continue to grow through that joy. It was a mindset of my own making that I needed to change, but Buddhism and physics, at least the physics of the universe as it stands today, some of the laws seem to be holding up. That there's no reason to suffer to grow. And I think a lot of us tell ourselves that. Now, with that said, I needed to go to Vietnam, and it took me 10 years to come to that conclusion after Vietnam. I mean, I was damaged, and in some ways, that damage, I still carry it with me. But now I see my time, and I'm no longer a victim of that period of my life. Now I see it as a gift. In Buddhism, again, there's things called wrathful deities, which are powerful energies that are in a compassionate, loving way, but tough love. They essentially are there to protect and to awaken, but they're not necessarily doing it in the most nurturing sort of way, in the nurturing in the way we might recognize it as. And I think my Vietnam experience was a wrathful deity. It was, I was blessed in a lot of ways. I stepped on a personal popcorn mine that didn't go off. The sniper just missed me. I felt the whiz go by my ear. There was as we all have stories, but there was many occasions where I was a hair's breadth away from either being blown to pieces or being shot to pieces. And in each time, there was sort of an intervention. When I stepped on the mine, that area had been cleared by a bulldozer, and there were hundreds of them on the ground, but it was supposed to have been cleared. I felt it under the shank of my boot, something that is crazy because we had steel shanks in the boots to protect us from bamboo spikes, booby traps. And yet I stepped on that mine and it sank into the deep, the overturned earth and didn't go off. And I felt it under my boot. So I just lifted my foot and there it was. And then I looked and saw there was hundreds of them all around me, all of which would have detonated at the same time, I'm sure. So I backed myself out through my footprints and reported the area hot. So it was, that's little miracles happen. Little miracles happen.
That's scary.
I
couldn't even imagine.
Scary. Yeah, it was. I mean, we were overrun in Laos, and when I'm sure you've experienced this too. For me, it was, as the night went on, I dug my foxhole a little deeper and a little deeper. And after artillery, the 4 or 5 hours of artillery, it was just a waiting game for the on the line to see which part of the line was going to be under assault. But when I came out of the hole in the morning, there was an unexploded shell right next to my hole. Again, there's really no explaining it.
Right.
Somebody walks, does the same thing and they lose a leg, or does the same thing and loses a life, and many people did. And there's no explaining why I didn't, really, except for, I don't know. And so I'm making the best of what life I have, because it was gifted to me again and again.
You had another mission, which is what you encountered afterwards. I mean, I have to imagine, I know the impact you made on my life in just I think it was like a 10, 15-minute phone conversation. I can only imagine the positive impact you've made on how many other people in your lifetime from that point on. I mean, it's got to feel a little humbling.
Oh yeah, very much so. When I'm about to go on tour tomorrow, first time in Colorado, first time in 2 years, and because of COVID, of course. But the first part of the tour is at the University of Tucson. University of Tucson, believe it or not, has a Department of Consciousness Studies.
Really?
And the conference, which happens every 2 years, that I'm presenting at, is called the Science of Consciousness. And they bring in people from all over the world who have been studying what consciousness is. I mean, we're all conscious beings. We all know what consciousness is in some way. But the study of consciousness had been pretty much ignored. And I think it's consciousness not only for humans, but for other sentient beings on this planet. So I'm pretty excited about being there for the next 4 days, and then I'm off to Colorado to do a series of gong bath meditations. But I approach the vibrational healing as an engineer. So I use sacred geometry, rhythms that are found naturally in the life pulse of the planet. I use harmonics and frequencies that are known to entrain the brain, to cause physical, emotional, and even a spiritual uplifting. At the very least, reducing stress. At the very most, actually causing a physical healing to occur. The feedback I've gotten over the years has been nothing short of extraordinary.
Wait, it's nice. It's refreshing. Like I know when I was in school, there was a bunch of ridiculous college courses you could take that really didn't have any value. When I went, it's nice to see, and of course, it putting myself back at that age, I can see when maybe I wouldn't have seen the importance of it, but to see that schools are starting to explore into more of that, like the consciousness, the sound waves and the healings, and like one of the things that happened shortly after, and I call it my awakening after our conversation, is I got Reiki certified. Now, a couple of years prior to that, I would have said, okay, that's ridiculous voodoo stuff, whatever. I'm not going to bother. But now that I know the science behind it and the engineering, it's like, okay, that's a legitimate thing. It's not just whatever, pay me $1 and I'll tell you your fortune stuff. And there's music. I've noticed that I was a big hard rock, heavy metal person. Still am. But I'm finding my diversity of music ranging everything from I'm listening to a lot more classical music to a lot more like older remake Germanic music to international stuff, and listening to a lot of when I meditate. And you have to send me email me a good list that you would recommend for like the different megahertz and stuff when I'm doing my meditations. It truly is amazing what that can do to you when you're listening to it.
Oh yeah. I have one story, and I have many, but one story is I have, I think, 5 CDs on the market, and a DVD and a teaching CD, I think. But anyway, one of the earlier CDs is called Termiana, which is like spiritual gift. And a woman who came to one of my gong baths purchased a CD, and she brought it home and played it in a subliminal sort of way. She played it low through the speaker systems in the house. And she reported back some weeks later and said that first thing she noticed was the communication between her teenagers and her husband and herself was more harmonious. They seemed to be more compassionate and pleasing of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said that her 15-year-old son, who had a disaster of a room, decided to clean up his room on his own. And then she said that her husband, who was threatening to clean out the garage for 5 years, suddenly decided to clean out the garage. And so she was laughing about that, but she said, but even beyond that is her neighbor who had apparently like old refrigerators and washing machines and things of that nature in the backyard, a real eyesore of the neighborhood, decided to clean all of that out and put in a garden. And she said there was no difference from 1 month to another over the years, except for playing the sacred sound vibrations of that particular CD in a subliminal way that was radiating beyond the household and ultimately even into the yards next door.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, there's many really profound stories of people who are found healing. But I think not only, you can put out as much as you can do the science as much as you want. And I know what stimulates what part of the body and what will cause a toxic release of toxins that are trapped in the body and things of that nature. But I think people have to be prepared to want to heal. I think most healers that I have come across, both on a medical level, on a doctoral level, and more on an emotional level, have agreed that once that healing is a co-participant. I can't just go to the doctor and say, heal me. I have to really want to heal.
Right.
And so that's a lot of that is found in vibrational healing as well. Although it's a language that is uniformly understood. So you don't have to, the person that comes to one of my experiences does not have to study Buddhism, does not have to be a Buddhist, does not have to be a Christian, could be anything that might think, any story that they tell themselves is acceptable, because the vibration is really talking to us on a more direct level, a level of understanding that is part of our DNA, if you will.
Yeah.
So
now, when somebody, like, for somebody new, like I feel I have a plethora of stuff I still need to learn. But when you're listening to some of those, do you recommend them playing, like when I do my meditation, like playing them at a lower hertz to where you're just barely hearing it, or a comfortable level that's soothing to you?
I think experiment with it. When I listen to trance-inducing medicine sounds, I sometimes play it very, very loud, because there's just sheer joy of doing that. And oftentimes I'll play that kind of very low, so that it's not distracting or engaging in any way, but it just sits there in the background. There's a valley that I'm going to be driving through from, it's on the other side of Alamosa into Colorado, past the Great Sand Dune National Park, where there's a Buddhist stupa there, and there's a lot of, the valley is very, very special, and it's very long. A lot of UFO, it's known for UFO activity and stuff like that. But it's a very special place for Buddhists, in that there's a stupa that was built there that is is a very powerful pilgrimage point.
I'll have to mark that on my calendar and check it out one day.
Yeah. But I play Krishna Das, I think it's called One Word, which is a way of call and response singing that deals with mantras, which are sacred syllables that are strung together for a healing purpose, or for an altering one's consciousness, or for just the feel of joy. And in that valley particularly, I play that as loud as I can in my car and sing with it throughout the valley, because it's just that the energy of that valley and the energy of those syllables, that mantras, is uplifting. It's spiritually uplifting. So
that's got to be an amazing
whatever
experience.
you want.
I can only imagine. Like, I'm visioning it, and I just like that sounds like it would be just absolutely breathtaking.
It really is a special place.
Now,
there are many special places out there.
Now, I know you said you're going on tour. You're leaving tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm leaving tomorrow. Tomorrow is a reception for all of the presenters. And then my first presentation is on Wednesday morning, and then on Thursday morning, repeated again on Thursday morning. And in the meantime, there are keynote speakers and panels and things of that nature too, all on different aspects of the science of understanding consciousness, both from a philosophical point of view and from a biochemical point of view. The more we can understand about our own consciousness, I think that the greater we can utilize it for good.
Yes, I believe that too. And I would love to see some of your notes from that when you get back. That seems it'd be. Yeah. I'm still learning a lot of that stuff, how to understand and comprehend it, but I'm working on it. And
yeah, me too. I think it's an ongoing, a lifetime pursuit. But after the conference, then I'm going to Red Feathers, Colorado, where it's kind of interesting. The conference is in Tucson, which the weather is now 92 there. And then Red Feathers, the high is going to be 30. And the cold, and the low is going to be 22 at night.
But
it's Red Feathers is
I was just saying, that's something that I just don't think that I can ever get through, is being in that kind of cold weather anymore. Ever since I left Connecticut, I'm just like, I don't ever want to do it again.
Yeah, it's not very pleasant for me either, but it's, you go where I'm presenting this is a stupa there that was built to last 1,000 years. And there's very rarely can you enter a stupa, and this is a teaching stupa. So there on the inside of that stupa is a magnificent Buddha in meditation that's maybe 2 stories high, and I give a presentation at the feet of the Buddha there, and then I usually stay for teachings or for my own retreat for a couple of days, and I will. And then I'll move on to Boulder and Denver and do a series of programs there. And the last program I'm doing is, I think, May the 4th in Aspen at the chapel in the middle of Aspen, which is a very special place. So yeah, and then in May, the last part of May, I go to Chicago and do a series, probably a 10-day series there.
Now, so for all the nerds that are listening,
very rewarding.
For all the nerds that are listening, like myself, on May 4th, are you going to have lightsabers or from the Star Wars?
No. Although Aspen would be a great place for it. I don't know if you've ever been to Aspen, but the mountains just rise up from your feet, and they however 5,000-6,000 feet is pretty amazing, and the valley itself is pretty high. And this is a chapel that is built on a little knoll right in the middle of Aspen. It's really quite magical.
I got a guy that I was in the military. At the last couple of years, I was in the Army in Florida. And he's actually going to be, when he makes his way out here to Texas, we're going to be sitting down doing a show with him. He started this whole campaign. He sold his house. He sold everything that wasn't essential. The only thing he kept was his Harley that he keeps in the back of a bus. And he calls his bus the Fishbowl. And he just traveling around, picking up different odd jobs here and there. He using his retirement from the military to just travel. And he's like, dude, you got to come check some of this stuff out. So one of my things that a goal for me that would be absolutely amazing is to do something like that, but see some of those sites that like you were talking about. I think more of, he like is going around, like he was in North Carolina working as an aide and an educator for rafting. I think I would more along the lines love to go to like some of these sites that you're talking about and just plop my butt down and just look up and just try to just work to connect to the energy in the universe. To me, that would just be an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, how long have you been touring, doing these for well, let me add, for some people who might be listening that might not quite understand what a gong bath is, how would you explain it to, or how would you describe it to somebody who might not know exactly what they are?
Yeah, well, the gong bath requires a specific high quality instrument that is tuned. Most gongs are not tuned. This one is tuned to as I said, the earth frequency 136.1, but that's the fundamental tuning. And then based on that fundamental, a number of octaves are achievable by mathematically raising the vibration of the fundamental up through various stages. The human ear can, on the best ear day, can hear 21 different octaves. This instrument has the capacity of producing 33 different octaves. And so the palette or the spectrum of sound is enormously wide. And the way I play it, I can produce overtones, which are, waves. Sound is waves in space. So if you design a wave to complement another wave in such a way as to sperm or to produce another sound on top of it that is really not being produced by the instrument, but only being produced by how the waves of the instrument of the different frequencies are connecting to one another within the air around us. Then you have multiple overtones that can also be created on top of the harmonics. All of that to say that it is like the first 15 to 20 minutes, I play frequencies that are create a safety net, a quality of sanctuary. So people de-stress and they're feeling very comfortable, and it's a very pleasant sort of landscape or soundscape for themselves. And then I move into other frequencies that are a little more challenging, but are still harmonious with one another, to effectuate, for instance, the stimulus of the vagus nerve being the largest nerve in our body. It connects all of your internal organs together, bioelectrically together, through the nervous system, with the exception of the spleen. The spleen is the only organ that's left out of the net of the vagus nerve. But the vagus nerve draws upon itself stimulus from sound. It terminates in the earlobe, and runs through the large bone behind the ear. So I can play the instrument to stimulate the vagus nerve, causing it to stimulate the internal organs. And what happens, if you go to my YouTube channel, you can actually see the blood cells before a gong bath and after a gong bath. And you can see that the sluggishness of the blood is alleviated. The blood moves a lot freer. The blood cells are more oval and less distorted. The white blood cells are more luminous, and the specks of foreign material that gets trapped within the cells themselves, and ultimately within the organs, is then released into the fluidic suspension between the cells. So when it's there, if you drink plenty of water, you just naturally eliminate it from your body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very detoxifying experience. But all the while, I'll keep that drome of the sanctuary underneath the various palette of vibrations that I'm using to invoke like an opening, an energetic opening of the heart, or I use the chakra system a great deal, because within the chakra system is the prana, the life force that
Right.
we all understand, because we all feel it, and we all understand it when it's not there too. And then I come full circle back to the sanctuary at the end of a 1 hour or an hour and a half presentation. And I can do that because of my understanding of sacred geometry and of music therapy, of physics, and at even a quantum level, and the nature of sound and how it integrates with the body. We know that on a physical level, everything vibrates. There's nothing in the universe that's not moving at a very small quantum level or at a very large level. And so that's true within us.
Yeah.
Our cells are always vibrating. Our mind is always turned on. And if we can enter that space, that vibrational space within the body, for the benefit of not only that being, but for all beings, then we can invoke some major changes in life. And when I was focusing on Tibetan bowls, with which I still work with the school and bring many of them in for the school and for whoever might want one. I felt that every household should have a Himalayan bowl, just to find a level of harmony within themselves, which would improve everybody's life. So.
My dog I love my dog. She's my fur baby, but she sometimes will get a little antsy, a little anxiety ridden, especially if there's a storm coming or if she hears noises. And of course, usually she starts getting that way right when she knows she's not going to be getting any attention, because I'm about ready to go into my meditation. So when I do it, it's become like a daily thing. Before I go into my meditation and listening to my music and going into it, I actually play this bowl for about 5-10 minutes, and then she's just totally calmed down, relaxed, and she's just like, okay, you do what you got to do. No, I'm good.
Yeah, good.
And I remember my first experience or exposure to the singing bowls was at great grandma's funeral, when you played there with your mom, and then at my grandmother's, your sister. And I always remember, even then, and that, well, hindsight's 2020. We all make our paths, and things happen in times when we need them to. But I always remember watching you play those, just listening to the sound of like just being very taken by it, that is just very attuned to it.
There is a death ritual that involves vibrations that the bowls will accompany or to support, and it's a mantra that permeates the veil of the non-living. In Buddhist concepts, one lives in what is called the bardo stage, between lifetimes, for 49 days. And in that, there are opportunities that are presented to the newly deceased that will determine their next incarnation. Oftentimes people are frightened of death, or have lived in fear of death, or have lived in fear of, just in fear. And some of the opportunities that are presented in that state can be fearful when seen through fearful eyes. And so the bowl and the particular mantra, which is a sort of an instruction for the newly departed, is recited to help that person whose energy is still very much present to make better decisions, to see things with clear eyes rather than fearful eyes. And I believe that to be helpful for, I say the mantra for anything that I find road dead, anything, not only humans, but all sentient beings. And for people who are suffering as well, the people who are left behind.
I think in people who are suffering, it's not just a loss of a loved one, or what they may be experiencing in their life, or maybe a breakup or loss of a job or financial hardships. It's for me, with a few of the things that I've gone through over the last, I think that was almost 7 years ago we had that conversation now. When I have when I'm going through having the hardest time, or even being as a veteran, I mean, we never stop hearing the screams or seeing the visions that we saw. I still will turn on different things with different mantras or different megas, just to kind of help bring me back and say, hey, dude. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it, of course, but
Hey,
dude, everything will be all right. Take a deep breath and move on. And I wish more people would do that rather than fly off the handle and lose their tempers.
Yeah. It's a learning experience. I was the same way for many years after I returned to the States. I didn't belong there in Vietnam. I didn't belong in the Army. And I didn't belong to the life that I had left behind. So I was lost for, as I say, 10 years.
See, it's kind of a weird that, like people say, the people who know me now couldn't say that they could never imagine me being loud, vulgar, losing my temper and smashing things and throwing things. But just like, I could never picture you any other way than what you are now. Very calm, monotone, very down to earth. And it's funny how these journeys that we take to better ourselves and to heal ourselves and expand ourselves, how much more of a difference if we take a snapshot now how we are and look back on the way we used to be.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories about various teachers in Buddhism, and one of them is Milarepa, who was a black sorcerer. He's a black man. He used black magic, and a warrior. And the way one of the stories goes, he, wore war, 1,500 years ago, 1,600 years ago was very much in your face. You know, there was without painting too horrid a picture, he awoke to the horror of his experience in the middle of a war scene, war front, literally covered in blood and gore, and he just suddenly understood and saw clearly the horrific experience that he was in the middle of and participating in. And he's always depicted as, I don't have him here with me, but he's always depicted as having one hand up to his ear, and that was to depict that he heard the Dharma being sort of a resident truth of existence, and he had to go through the absolute opposite experience to awaken to the Dharma and to realize who and what he was. And from there on, he became a teacher, a practitioner of the Dharma, and he said to have written 120,000 teaching poems and songs that are still sung all across the Tibetan Plateau.
That's wild. So now you're going on tour. How often do you tour? Often, or you try to go like once a year, twice a year?
You know, I used to go to Colorado 3 times a year, and 2 to 3 times a year, and Chicago 2 to 3 times a year. I do a number of conferences, 2 or 3 conferences, depending on the conference, usually a year. All of that, of course, stopped for COVID, but I'm changing that up a little bit. I've been invited all over the world, and I'm going to do some teachings in France in September. So, and I did some of that last year as well. So I'm thinking now that I'm going to do, an international tour, maybe 2 months out of a year, and then I don't want to abandon the following in Chicago or in Colorado, but I'll probably go twice a year to both of them, and then do whatever interesting conferences might come up.
Well, if you're doing an international show,
I say no more than I do yes. Pardon me?
I was saying, if you're doing an international show, you do know that Texas considers itself its own country. So,
so does California.
Is Texas going to be on that list at all?
I've been invited to Texas. I would like to do a tour of that nature. I have an old BMW, a 73 BMW motorcycle that is. I would love to do a tour. Put a little trailer for the instruments and just do a tour of some states that I don't normally get to. I drove across country, and it was a hoot. It was a lot of fun. So that's I'm open to doing things, especially if there was a conference, for instance, in Texas, then that was intriguing. That invited me to come to, then I would certainly do that, and then do a small tour around that or something like that. So,
well, if you ever make it down this way, you definitely got to let me know.
Okay. All right.
I know I'm not sure. I'm not a big fan of Texas myself, and I know that all the Texas people are going to come at when I walk out my door later on. But I miss Florida mainly because I'm a tropical person.
Or
a mountains person. And but Texas is not bad. I mean, we don't get the snow, and that's kind of what I like. Anybody that tells you that the cost of living is better here, they're lying to you.
Okay. All right.
It has not gotten all that much better here. But it's not bad. There is some beautiful scenery, some beautiful road riding around. But man, I the guys, that gentleman I was telling you about earlier, that the fishbowl tour. Some of the stuff I see him doing, that's really what I would like to do. That's kind of my goal.
We have a remarkable country. There's so much to explore here. I did cross country July, and I think I hit on, I don't know how many national parks came across, tenting my way across, and it was magnificent. Magnificent.
Yeah, that was, what was it, last year or 2 years? Because I think I remember following you on Facebook. You post on that.
Yeah, last year.
You really felt okay sleeping in that tent on top of the car?
I did, I know.
I'd be afraid I'd be rolling over, and that'd be a far fall for me.
Yeah. No, the tent is pretty sturdy. I'm bringing it with me on this tour to Colorado.
Are you?
So, yeah.
Oh, you're brave. I just don't trust me sleeping and not moving around enough to roll over the side.
There's drawbacks. I mean, if you have to go pee in the middle of the night, you have to get out of the tent, go down the ladder, that type of thing. Or if, once you set up tent, when the car and the tent are one, so once you set up your campsite, you have to break down the tent to do something with the car.
But make sure you get everything you need at the gas station before you set up.
Yeah. But it's convenient, and it's I pull into a campsite, and 10 minutes later, the tent is ready. So it's.
Now you're also a big fan of sailing too. You got from I've seen some of the pictures, some of the nice, pretty nice sailboat, right?
I have actually two. I have a Hirschoff 22 that was built by Bristol in Rhode Island. Something of a novelty out here on the West Coast. And then I have a Western boat architect. I have a Roberts, and that is no, it's a Perry. It's a Perry, which is more of a blue water boat, a 41 footer. And so those two boats I have down on the bay, and I sail the 22 because it's quick, and to sail a small boat is a lot different than sailing a bigger boat. But I have them both set up so I can sail them by myself, and I hope to at sometime in the near future get down to the Sea of Cortez with a big boat and sail it down there for a couple of years.
You would probably throw me overboard. I love, we grew up on, you remember when I was a kid, my grandparents, they had their boat, and we were always on the water. And I turn into the biggest kid whenever I get on a boat and I get out in the water. Especially if I was on a sailboat like yours, I'm wearing the pirate hat and the wig, and all 9 yards. And
yeah, I agree. It's fun, but it's a nice place to meditate too, actually. So.
I can just imagine. I've never actually been out on the water on a sailboat. I've been out on the water more recent years with my uncle. Him and my aunt Janice would go camping in Rhode Island, and we would go out in his 17-foot whaler and go offshore fishing. And it was to me, it was always peaceful just to kill the boat and the motor, drop the poles, sit back, just the sound of the water lapping against the boat, and just that peacefulness.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how much more relaxing it is on a sailboat. Just the sound of the wind going through, the sails flapping and the water. I mean, that's got to be amazing.
It's poetry in motion, really. It really is. Boats are one of the best inventions that humankind has ever come up with, and they're they're lyrical. They are like frozen poetry, really magnificent, especially classic boats like I have. So
I can, and the sky nights when you're out in the water, away from the light pollution and from the cities and the towns and all that stuff. That just, to me, I mean, yes, you have nice skies in the mountains and in the country and the plains, but to me, some of the most breathtaking, soul piercing, warming sights of the sky and just the universe is out in the water.
Yeah, I agree.
So, well, look, I mean, I appreciate you doing this with me. Before we
thank you.
let it go, is there anything that you want to let people listening know? I know one quick thing. How would you recommend somebody who might want to get more information into looking into getting educated and taught in a Buddhist manner? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but you know, like have them look for their local area and just walk in and say, hey, I want to learn? Or do you have more of a better way to?
I don't know. There's certainly teaching centers around. There's quite a few around here. If you were here, I could recommend someone. As far as books are concerned, there are just multiple. The Buddha Within is a wonderful book to start with. The Dalai Lama has put out some magnificent teaching books, easy to read and non-secular. So, I mean, if someone was really interested in delving into the Buddhist teachings, they could email me and I'd send them a list of books that I would recommend. Cool. If there's someone interested in vibrational healing, they could go to my website, sacredsoundgongbath.com, or to my YouTube channel, which is under my name, Richard Rudis. There's tutorials there and teachings and a lot of online experiences. When I'm home, I do a full moon gong bath on the Zoom network every full moon. I won't be doing it in May, but June and July I will. So there's a lot of opportunities, but if I could be of service or of help, I'd be happy to, to recommend things.
All the websites are right on your email that I can put up there for people to contact to and everything, right?
Yeah.
And when I do the description.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'll definitely do that.
Good.
Well, look, I really, really do appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate you doing this.
I hope we can do this again one time, and
sure,
maybe even do it live if I get out from and I get into a bus and I start traveling around with my buddy Doug.
Yeah, good for you.
And other than that, again, I want to thank you very, very much, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of people when I say thank you. Because I know, like, for me myself, that, like I said, it was only a 10-minute conversation, but that 10-minute conversation changed me from being angry, disgruntled, rude, the list can go on, to being a more centered and more grounded, more tolerant person. And that I have lost friends because of it, but I think when we start to spiritually grow, I call it the trash takes itself out, the toxicity starts to leave. And I'm completely fine with that. But I see myself now that I am a much more happier and balanced person. And that was a direct result. I will always say there's that 10-minute conversation that you and I had. So, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people that felt the same way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, you're doing good work here. Take care. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. And I'll make sure to send you all the links to it too.
Good.
So
Thank you.
Check it out once I get it up.
All right. Okay? Very good. Thank you.
All right.
Take
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Have a good day. So for everybody else, I want to thank you for listening in. The show will be up on all of our media platforms. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. It's an honor and a pleasure to bring you these types of positive and motivational conversations. Hopefully some people got something out of it. I know I did. Your support is always appreciated. Please check us out on Spotify, YouTube, everywhere else. If you go to our link tree, which is linktr.ee/SENTINALSLAR, you'll find all of our stuff there. If you like what we're doing and you like how we're evolving so far, you go to buymeacoffee.com/Sentinels Lair. That link can be found in our description. Again, that's a huge help to help keep us going. And the best thing that I can ask for is if you give us a like and a follow and a share, and on our social media and or YouTube, give us a comment. All right, everybody. Well, it was a good time. Episode number 3 is down in the books. And again, I want to thank Richard Rudis, and check in the descriptions, and all of his information will be there.
Welcome. You are now entering Sentinels Lair podcast show.
Expanding our mind through stories of everyday people.